Welcome back to Cherry Picking, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Sorry, it has been a couple of weeks since our last episode. My fault, not Manny's, but he's back. How you doing, Manny?
All good, thank you, mate. And just looking forward to this. It has been quite a long time, and obviously I've been quite busy doing a great deal of other things. And listen, anytime you're always free, it's always a privilege to sort of hop on. And I sort of work according to your schedule when it comes to, the whole cherry picking thing. But good to be back. And I'm also really grateful to your friend Vishnu, and also for the help that he's been doing over in my neck of the woods, where we were affected by the recent cyclone. And many of the areas have sort of improved now, but there are still some low-lying areas which have been, very badly affected. And hopefully the people over there will still be able to find some form of relief. But, all I can say is that, God, the Lord should hopefully be with everyone affected, and hopefully people will find relief and find peace.
Yeah, most definitely. And the link to that video is actually in the description box. So whatever you can give, I know it's Christmas, but whatever you can give, please, please, please do give generously. And, I tell you what, he's doing a remarkable job. A lovely, lovely man, who's been badly affected himself, really, by it. So, yes, been some very tough times in Chennai. But let's get on to the football. And I think in the last video, wasn't it? I wasn't too positive about Andoni Iraola. But do you know what? I'm one of those people that I am absolutely delighted I've been proven wrong. What do you make of it? What do you make of it? It's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant because, some of these people, I think, online, and when I was knocking Andoni and saying, I don't know if because I've said throughout, lovely, lovely, lovely man, but I just didn't know whether or not he was going to get us motoring. And that's the big, big concern, as a football fan. But, a lot of people, as soon as he did, started turning around and saying, oh, you didn't like him, you was all against him, you can't stand him and all this. And it's further from the truth. Oh, you still wanted us to lose because you wanted Gary back. No, it's the biggest load of rubbish going. It's so stupid, isn't it? I want my team to do well. That's why I was saying what I was. But what do you make of it?
Mate, welcome to the club. You do know that both our managers, Andoni Iraola and Mikel Arteta, were in the same youth team, or in this case,
Yes.
under-10s team back in their region of Spain. So obviously they've sort of been in each other's pockets since childhood. And I have the same issue as someone who does not believe Mikel Arteta is the man for the job. The big difference is that while Iraola has now effectively had a half season in charge of the Cherries, Arteta's now been with us for a half season and 3 full ones, soon to be a 4th full one. And after, the beginning of that half season, which ended miraculously with an FA Cup win, people need to bear in mind that I was never in favour of having Arteta coming in. I never really saw the idea of getting someone like him in who never had any coaching experience, simply because he, learnt from the best at Manchester City. And Arsenal is certainly not the type of place where you can just hand a rookie like Mikel that sort of a job.
Yeah.
And so despite all of the backing that he's been given, he has not taken us any closer to winning a trophy. Last season, freakishly, we were well ahead, but the fact that we faded away is partly down to him in many ways, and also some other factors. I get this rubbish a lot from other people. They're the type of people who say to me that I would rather see Arsenal fail and enjoy the dopamine rush about being proven right about Mikel Arteta than see Arsenal win and be willing to accept the fact that I was wrong. When he won the FA Cup, I threw my backing behind him.
Yeah.
I didn't want him at the club. I wanted Ancelotti, who ironically went to Everton, when in another universe, the Everton legend would have gone over there and the serial winner, Ancelotti, would have come over and managed us.
Yeah.
But maybe in some ways, Ancelotti dodged the bullet by not coming to us, but that's a story for another day. And we all know, of course, what happened during that time. He deserved support after the FA Cup win, but that first full season, we were so dreadful. We couldn't even buy a home win. At one point, we were doomed to finish in a mid-table position. Somehow, we managed to emulate our 8th place finish, but we couldn't even secure European football. And the narrative ended up being focused on how several players who supposedly downed tools under Unai Emery, what a job he's doing at Villa, by the way.
Well, exactly.
Were the problem under Arteta. And Arteta was given the respect and the backing to try to stamp his mark on the team, but Unai Emery was never given that. And there's a part of me that believes that the way Emery was treated was absolutely disgraceful, in stark contrast to how Arteta's being given so much support. And I still have these debates on Twitter every single day. So how does that apply to you? You are a passionate Bournemouth supporter. You've gone to Dean Court many times this season to watch the team play.
Yeah.
And you've seen for yourself the type of football that's being played. Obviously, Bournemouth is still not quite out of the woods yet, because when you take a look at how Everton have been playing and have been able to use that points deduction as a sort of a motivation to try to, get as many points as they can, effectively with an us against the world, or in this case, us against the league mentality, you're still technically not out of the woods, and that terrible goal difference of yours with those defeats at home to Arsenal and away at Liverpool will not have helped matters at all. But there is a recovery taking place. And somehow I think it's fair to say that a lot of the players who were not really firing on all cylinders earlier have started to step up. I'm thinking of people like Marcus Tavernier, Justin Kluivert, even the likes of Luis Sinisterra, Donga Otara. The defense looks a little bit solid with the return of Morara Neto and Lloyd Kelly. The midfield seems to be looking okay. Why David Brooks isn't really, trusted anymore these days, I'm not too sure. But I do hope he will, find his way back into the team, because he will certainly lend a great deal to that. And Iraola should know that the team and the squad are better with him than without him. And, of course, you've got Dom Sol and Phil Bill. You're starting something. You're gaining some momentum. And I think the most important thing is that the fans shouldn't allow themselves to get too carried away. That win over Manchester United at Old Trafford, and I saw those goals. Brilliant. What a game that was. I do know that Harry Redknapp, during his time as manager of Bournemouth, really gave United a run for their money at Old Trafford. But not even he was quite able to get them over the line, I think. Not he, not Gary O'Neill, not even Eddie Howe. So for Iraola to do that was just amazing. And we could all say that, United are quite frankly an absolute shambles, as proved by their Champions League exit, among other things. But you still got to beat the teams in front of you, and that's exactly what you did. And whoever would have thought that a team which looked completely low on confidence after a loss to one Manchester club would go and beat the other Manchester club on their home turf. Amazing. But that Newcastle win was what really gave you belief, in my opinion.
Most definitely. And I think, that was the thing that really gave us a bit of impetus, because, casting my mind back now, and it feels a long time ago, even though it wasn't, that Everton defeat at Goodison Park. Now, Everton at that time, let's be honest, weren't particularly very good, and, well, to be honest, it was just shambolic from minute one. But what Andoni Iraola has done now is he's got a side there that he trusts. Semenyo has been excellent. Tavernier has been excellent. Players, the defence has been shored up. I think the players have actually started buying into it. The one thing as well, though, is Iraola has now got his assistant, And was he taking on too much? Was it a case that maybe, if he casts his mind back, and I can't speak for Andoni Iraola, but if he was to cast his mind back, it might have been a case that, okay, you know, we didn't do particularly very well, but maybe if he had carried on playing the way that Gary O'Neill had, that we could have got some more points on the board in the early days. But at the same time, another way to look at that is that would we be in the position we are in now, where we are playing free flowing football? It's excellent. It really is. A complete contrast. If you showed me the Everton game and the Man United games back to back, you wouldn't even think it was the same team.
You have an excellent point there, and it's hard to really talk about it. And I do remember you saying, obviously, that the jump from the type of football that you were playing under Gary O'Neill to now having to adopt this new style. We talk about the old cliche. You cannot try and put new wine in an old wineskin. I mean, that's more of a biblical thing, or perhaps more, apropos. You can't aim to build a new house with some old damaged tools or whatever it may be.
Yeah,
it was always going to take quite a bit of time to really for the players to sort of buy into that immediately. And I do remember you saying that if there were a way by which Iraola and one of his assistants could have married the two styles together to try to sort of have that pragmatism, but also introduce that kind of open style, it would have been good. And I keep talking about Mick McCarthy, who wanted to see his team play football, but also had the good sense to know that he was never going to play that sort of open style against some of the bigger teams. And so sometimes you got to shut up shop. And it proved to be that way against Arsenal, where I think, you guys tried to open up, but then we caught you far too often on the counter. Against City, it was more or less the same thing. And it's one thing to try to stay true to your principles. It's another thing altogether to sort of realize that sometimes in the Premier League, it's a tough place to play, and it's more often than not going to be a baptism of fire. And so your principles and your style will more often than not be tested. Now, the reason why I'm happy to talk about this is because I also want to take a look at where Bournemouth are right now. As I speak, they're 14th in the table. And the next fixtures that you've got after this are against Luton, against a Forest team, which are also going through a difficult period. A game against Fulham that are starting to score goals aplenty at home, but maybe not away from home. Then a little trip to North London to catch up with Ange Postecoglou and his Tottenham boys. And then that clash on New Year's Eve will pretty much round out the year. So for what it's worth, you now have at least two opportunities to get 3 points. The Fulham game's not going to be easy, and the Spurs game will obviously be a big test against a team which has also, under Postecoglou, been playing very open with a high line. And you've got a manager there who also wants to stay true to his principles and try and move away from the dour football that was there under Antonio Conte. And, it provides great entertainment. They had a beautiful start to the season, unlike Bournemouth, but now they've been badly pegged back.
Yeah.
So it will remain to be seen, of course, how you start to fare come the new year against some of the bigger teams, especially the teams who you're going to have to play again. In fact, your very first Premier League game on the 21st of January will be the home match against Liverpool. And we all knew that in the corresponding fixture last season, you lot had a wonderful smash and grab win against Jurgen Klopp's boys under Gary O'Neill. And of course, with O'Neill and Iraola being, chalk and cherries, as it were, in terms of footballing styles,
Yes.
will it be that Iraola will be able to emulate O'Neill there? One might not know. So all I will say right now is that in as much as you can be rightly proud of the results that you've earned, this has to be a time for a lot of introspection and to try and make sure that you really evolve, start to evolve more as a team and try and improve yourselves, because you can't rest on your laurels. And one of the things I admire about Unai Emery, another Basque coach who has been doing magnificently with Aston Villa and who schooled us over the weekend, is that, yes, his team are doing magnificently.
Mhm.
They're third in the league, a point behind Arsenal, 2 points behind Liverpool. And if, heaven forbid, we lose to Brighton over the weekend and Villa beat the Bees, they overtake us and go second. They
Yeah.
could potentially end up going top if Liverpool lose, but I don't know how much how much they can depend on that. But Emery's the type of manager who analyzes every single game, whether it's a loss or a draw or a win, and tries to sort of do better. And of course, it's pertinent to note that those two magnificent results against Manchester City and our lot came after a draw against you guys, where you actually played them a great deal. You literally, made it tough for them. And you sort of emphasized the point that they do have to improve their away performances. In fact, had it not been for Emiliano Martinez, who I believe is the best goalkeeper in the world, bar none,
Yeah.
you actually could have beaten them by a very good score. And it had to take a late Ollie Watkins header to sort of, dampen, to sort of spoil the party at Dean Core and sort of to sneak a point for them at your expense. But you are starting to improve. You are proving that you can definitely do well. It could very well be that your home form, if you are able to put up some more wins, might just, really keep you well afloat. But the trick is now to try to evolve that style into being a lot more, flexible in a way. And Emery's really flexible in his own right because, yes, they play a high line, but they mix that high line with a low block. And their defending against us was outstanding for the most part. Even when the high line was, beaten and they were able to get in behind, the defenders would come back and clear everything. And Martinez also pulled off some more than decent saves there. So that's how you see a manager evolving a certain style of play and making it very effective all round. They've had some dodgy results this season, don't get me wrong, and they still will need to strengthen their bench and improve some of their way form if they are to challenge for the title. And I don't think they will, but I absolutely would love to see them qualify for the Champions League, especially given the disrespect and the arrogance to which Unai Emery and Emiliano Martinez have been subjected by some Arsenal fans, especially some of those twits on Twitter. So Iraola should learn from Emery in many ways in how to try to, create a new style, sort of evolve that new style, which will be effective in some ways, and also try to, just try and marry the two styles. Have an open, free-flowing game, but also be pragmatic when you need it. And as long as he can get that, then I wouldn't be surprised if Bournemouth get some more results and make sure that they finish even higher than they did last season. And then they can try and, kick on from there. We'll see what happens.
Well, definitely. And I tell you what, it is. See, a lot of fans now, and to be honest, I'm included in this as well, have been looking at these fixtures coming up. So Luton, Forest, Fulham, they don't seem the scariest of fixtures. Got to be honest. And from what we was feeling, only a couple of weeks back, where we was looking over our shoulder, was doubting Iraola, we're now thinking, can we get 9 points out of 9 from those three fixtures? It's going to be tough. I think this weekend's game is going to be incredibly tough against Luton. 28 points. If we get on 28 points by the new year, it could even be more, because if we do get some result at Spurs, at the end of the day, we've got to be looking forwards. We can't be looking backwards at that point. And I think everybody's perceptions about Iraola, because he has been, of course, the way we sacked Gary O'Neill, And, me being a Gary O'Neill fan, we have come in for some stick, and you could say rightly so. Bill Foley's come in for some stick of that. But at the same time, we've got to start thinking, well, Iraola definitely is the right man for this job, because I'm impressed now with how it's all clicked all of a sudden. And like you hit the nail on the head. That Newcastle game, yes, a lot of people said it was against depleted Newcastle, lots of injuries there. But at the same time, that is what has got us motoring. You can't say the Burnley game did, because Burnley were lucky, unlucky not to equalise in that game. But that Newcastle game, we was a lot better. And to be honest, we've been a lot better. The two sides are indistinguishable, aren't they? Really?
Yeah, I'm actually taking a look at the table right now, and it's fair to say that the only thing that's separating you and Gary O'Neill's current team is the fact that you conceded 30 goals to their 26. So
Yeah.
you are -4 in terms of goal difference, behind them. But you scored the same number of goals, and and the records are played 16, won 5, drawn 4, lost 7. So you literally are neck and neck at the moment. And I want to say this right now. To go from wondering out loud whether he is really suited for the job to suddenly say, you know what, I've changed my mind, he's the right man. One thing I want to caution you against, Craig, is rushing to that sort of a judgment, because the thing about the Premier League is that it only takes one poor result to send everything completely crashing down.
Yeah.
And you take a look at Sir Eddie,
Yes.
albeit in the Champions League this time. Now, they made a magnificent start, drawing at the San Siro against AC Milan. And of course, with that amazing drubbing of a Paris Saint-Germain team, which were also in a shambles at the time. But two poor defeats to Borussia Dortmund home and away pretty much stalled them. They actually dominated PSG when they went to the Parc des Princes and actually took a well-deserved lead, but conceded a very jammy penalty and ended up drawing that game. And tragically, they also took the lead against Milan at St. James's Park. Had they beaten Milan and PSG failed to win, they would have gone to the next stage at the expense of the Parisians. But sadly, things just didn't quite happen, and Milan scored a late winner, and it all came crashing down. So it's these fine margins. So I don't want you and other Bournemouth fans to start getting your hopes up and saying, yes, we do have the right man for the job, and we're really, really happy, because, everything can change in the blink of an eye. I don't know if you remember the Jesus Jones song Right Here, Right Now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorites too, mate. I love that band. And yeah, so those words are mentioned in the lyrics, and the only time you can really say whether or not Iraola is the man to take the team forward is at the end of the season, when you take a look back and see everything in its totality. You sort of find out how far you go forward. And you don't want to be in a situation where you don't really improve on last season's finish under Gary O'Neill, because the sort of the narrative will therefore be, after that investment, after the big decision to get rid of Gary and bring Andoni in and enjoying a new style of play, we're still not quite better than we were the last time around. I suppose, for what it's worth, given the backing that he's received, you should probably, keep faith in him. But I also don't want this to be another Jesse Marsh style situation where, after a really good season, things go horribly wrong the next season. So what you mentioned there, a target being 28 points by the turn of the new year, and that may or may not include a hopefully positive result at the Tottenham Stadium. From there, if you can possibly kick on and get the points you need, the significance of that 28 points you've mentioned, Craig, is that you only need technically 4 more wins to get to the 40-point threshold, which will normally be enough. But then you can also try and kick on from there and maybe aim for maybe 50 points. And there's no reason why, you shouldn't be able to do that. But it is going to take a really concerted effort from both Andoni and the players to continue to stay true to that style of play. And a lot of people were saying that Arteta deserved time, but that first full season, we were so awful. And mind you, when we played Southampton at the Emirates, we fell behind before equalising and drawing. But if ex-gunner Theo Walcott's goal for the Saints had proved to be the winner, there's very little doubt in my mind that Arteta would have been sacked on the spot, because our home record that season was absolutely abysmal at that point. And, you know, fortunately, Arteta got a reprieve, and now Andoni got his reprieve and has started to build on that. But he now has to keep learning and evolving and making sure that the team doesn't rest on its laurels. It's pertinent to note, you are only as good as your next game. No matter how good you may have performed, you've still got the next game to worry about. And this is where I'm going to call out a lot of these arrogant Arsenal fans who had the nerve to say that after a very jammy 4-3 win over Luton Town, with Declan Rice scoring that breathlessly late winner, that we were going to go to Villa Park, smash their high line to smithereens. They only dominated Manchester City because they didn't have a midfield, but we do, and we're going to make sure that they pay for it. We all know what happened. And some of those fans now have a serious case of egg foo young on their faces, if they enjoy Chinese food, that is. And it just goes to show that you can't simply rest on your laurels and say that because we did well, we're going to continue on like this. And even Unai Emery will be telling his boys, forget about Manchester City, forget about Arsenal. Your next game is against Brentford at the GTEC Community Stadium. They don't have Brian and Mbuemo, but we won't have Douglas Luiz. You've got to prove yourself and make sure that you are worthy. And speaking of Aston Villa, they are still currently 0-0 against the Bosnian team. They now literally have to bring on their first team as John McGinn and Luca Digne for some of the youngsters, for some of the fringe players who haven't really impressed so far. This could be a jammy draw because Legia Warsaw 1-0 up, but a draw will suit them just fine. So, like I said, teams have got to get off that cloud from a win and focus on the next game. And Bournemouth will do well to forget about Manchester United and focus on Luton. And Luton are not going to be pushovers, mind you. They've already had 3-4 home losses to the likes of West Ham and us, and they've shown that they are willing to scrap. If they can get a decent striker who can fire in more goals, they could very well stay up, and a few established teams could very well be looking over their shoulder at the Hatters. Hopefully, Bournemouth will not be one of them.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be well clear at the end of the season. But the thing is Luton, let's move on to the Luton game because they have looked good. So, of course, there was that narrow 4-3 defeat against Arsenal, your team. And then, to be fair, and I watched this game, they probably had, control. I wouldn't say that they had more opportunities because they didn't, but they probably had control of the situation for 85 minutes of the game against Manchester City. Of course, Man City only need 5 minutes, and they put them to the sword. But Luton, like you say, are not going to be any pushovers. And actually, I'm a little bit worried because going back to that Man United game, fantastic win, great memories. It's, one thing, a lot of Bournemouth fans have said it's such a proud moment in supporting the football club to go up to Old Trafford and smash them 3-0.
Oh, yes.
If Arsenal did it or Liverpool did it, it wouldn't be so much a big deal for those teams because you've done it before. But for Bournemouth, it's a case of, wow, that's quite something. 11,000-seater stadium club going up to Old Trafford, one of the biggest stadiums in the country, and going to beat Manchester United. The thing is, I don't, and this is going to sound really, really, really negative, But that result stands for nothing if we don't get a positive result against Luton this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. And it segues. You're sort of piggybacking really of what I've said. You're only as good as your next game. If you
Mm,
can't, deliver the goods against Luton at Dean Core, if memory serves me right, because you will be
yes.
playing at home, then that's just going to sort of sum everything up. Maybe the results that you've been getting were just, a purple patch, and it just wasn't able to last. I wouldn't want you to discount the result against Burnley because you needed to win,
Mm,
any which way by hook or crook.
yeah.
And you got that win. It was a jammy sort of win. And
Hmm.
I don't mean to sound like a football snob, but as an Arsenal fan, I look down on our 4-3 win over Luton and say, you know what? We have no right to celebrate that win. And we had absolutely no right last season to celebrate that 3-2 win we had against your lot with that breathlessly late winner from Reece Nelson. Those fans who were singing Stuff of Champions and all of that, shamelessly, as I
Hmm.
said, were left with egg foo young on their faces. Or maybe egg fried rice. And whatever you choose, because you cannot really have that sort of an attitude. But with a team like Bournemouth, where you haven't really had too many wins, a win any which way would be like gold dust. I think there's a proverb which says that, to a hungry person, there's no such thing as a bad loaf of bread. In the same way, to a team which is struggling to win, there's no such thing as a jamming win. You got your win. And that gave you some self-belief to go ahead and try and get at Newcastle. And from there, the rest is history. But taking a look at the Luton team, which played against Manchester City,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, they used the same 3-4-3 formation that Gary O'Neill used very effectively for Wolves against City. And of course, they beat City 1-0 before we beat them 1-0. And I think we actually should thank Gary O'Neill for softening them up for us in a way. And Luton, I think, under Rob Edwards, I think they're starting to learn how to play well within themselves and to try and make the most of everything. Of course, when they played us, they were helped by some very shambolic goalkeeping from David Raya, it has to be said. And some of our defending was also completely abysmal. But Luton showed that they were willing to compete and fight hard in Ross Barkley, who's trying to, turn back the clock and prove that he's still capable, and Andros Townsend, who's,
Yeah.
been given a second wind, as it were. You got some really determined players, and that, Luton have, and they, I think that determination has sort of filtered through to the entire squad. So they're not going to be an easy team to come up against, and you will underestimate them at your peril. And so the most important thing to do is to take a look at each and every single game you've played and try and analyze where you could be better. And yes, you kept a clean sheet against United at Old Trafford, but I think it must be said that given their troubles with some of their players, the likes of Marshall and Rashford or another, this might be a little bit of a risque thing to say, but they couldn't hit a horse's backside with a banjo at the moment. And Luton are going to be a different kettle of fish because they're going to scrap and fight for every single point. So how you play against them will determine how you win, or how you fare, rather. And if you try to play in a very open manner against the Luton Town team, which are going to be very, tough defensively, will try the low block themselves, you're going to ask for trouble. So Iraola is going to have to analyze the way Luton have played against us and against City, and tell his boys, you know what, boys, we cannot take them for granted. They could very well surprise us if we're not careful. And that will mean, obviously, trying to, have a plan B in case there's an injury, because I do believe Max Aarons is still out for quite some time.
Yes, he
So
is.
well
Yeah.
done to the veteran Adam Smith for coming back in and filling in admirably. Will there be a place for someone like David Brooks to come back in and show what he can do, or has he been frozen out? I don't know. The left back position is also going to be something, going to be a possible area of concern, maybe. And as far as Neto is concerned, I do like the guy. I
Yeah.
love the idea of a journeyman who's come over to a smaller club and made the spot his own, earned the captaincy on merit, and is certainly playing his part as the captain and senior pro. But he might also want to look at some of his, performances and say that in some ways he could have done better. And that is something that Iraola will have to tell the boys, and he'll have to sort of tell himself. Look for ways to be better, because every game is a new game, and this Luton game will be no different. So tactically, if Luton employ the 3-4-3, you are going to have to be very careful, because that is, of course, what Gary O'Neill uses very well. And you do remember, quite sadly, what happened when Gary returned to Dean Court with his pack of wolves. I don't want to remind you about that. So
Yeah.
it's about evolution, and that is why I don't want your fellow Cherry fans to start, singing from the stands saying we've got the right man. There's still so many games to play, and every game is a new game. And this Luton game will really be a big test of his credentials. It might sound crass to say in a way, given that Luton are deep in relegation trouble, but bear in mind, you lot aren't exactly safe either.
No, and I think there's a lot of teams down there that could find themselves sucked in. Forest, Wolves aren't, out of the woods. Crystal Palace, have been dropping like a stone as well. Of course, another team that we recently beat, beating Crystal Palace away from home,
And
was
well done to you lot for
yeah.
scoring more goals than we did when we beat them.
You know what? I had to pinch myself because it seems to be that Crystal Palace is the one team that they're a bit of a bogey team to us, but it showed that completely different thought process. It was an excellent win, excellent win. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Palace were particularly on their game. Michael Leese, of course, was struggling a little bit. I think because I think once Eze and Elise are back together, playing together, I think there'll be a different, kettle of fish. But it was a great result. And of course, felt a little bit sorry for Jefferson Lerma, but then again, he shouldn't have left us, really, should he?
No sympathy for him. No sympathy for
No.
him. You showed him. You gave your heart to him, and you told him how much you wanted him to stay. But he still said he wanted to move on to supposedly bigger and better things. You know, you pretty much put him in his place. I think a lot of Arsenal fans pretty much have that idea about Emiliano Martinez, but I can never really be angry with him because he deserved to be our first choice, and he wasn't getting the opportunities he deserved. Lerma was still very much a star at the club, and you lot wanted him to stay, and he decided to move on. No sympathy for him. It's football.
No, completely agree. Well, I tell you what, let's also discuss something that really has come out today. So, Kris Temple from BBC Radio Solent, it's on BBC Sounds, anybody who wants to watch it. And also, of course, I did a short little video about it as well. Bill Foley spoke to him, and Bill Foley mentioned a new stadium. And this is exciting. But again, it's been met with a mix, really. Some fans are fine with the actual capacity. Some fans are like, well, why are we only building it at 18,500? I personally think that this is a clever tactic, as long as it's like because all these new stadiums they're a bit like Meccano sets, aren't they, where you can just lift the roof off, put more bits in. um but some fans are like, well, why are we not building a 22, 25? There was one figure that was going around, when stadiums were mentioned, of 37,000. Now, I'm sorry, but 37,000 is ridiculous. Moving from an 11,000 seater stadium to 37,000, because, and I'll give you the reasoning, the catchment area, of Bournemouth is big. I think we can attract a lot of people from Somerset and Hampshire and all those sort of locations. We can't do it right now because there's no seats for them to go into in the current Dean Court. What's your thoughts on this, announcement? Do you think that 18,500, with Bill Foley's already mentioned can go up to 22,000. Hopefully, it can go beyond that as well once the scene grows. But personally, I think this is sensible.
It is. I mean, one of the things which I can really say right now is that I am quite glad that you made the decision not to try to go too big too soon
Hmm.
and really go all out for a bigger stadium because, again, you also want to be prepared for some of the eventualities. And let's bear in mind that Bournemouth is still not yet sort of re-established in the Premier League as of yet.
Yeah.
So the very idea that you can actually have that you might want to build for the future far too soon and have a really big stadium as it is right now, but run the risk of seeing Bournemouth getting relegated. I mean, it would effectively be, a great deal of money wasted. And as long as Foley's made it crystal clear that he wants to start small, but slowly but surely increase the capacity depending on how fortunes pan out in the subsequent seasons, it's smart business, in my opinion. Um, Bournemouth, with all due respect to them, are a really nice, a really. I don't want to say nice. They have some wonderful charms as a club, but in terms of actual silverware, I'm not too sure that they necessarily have the history of some of the bigger clubs
Hmm.
in the football league. And so, while the bigger clubs can at least look to try and um, build upon on their existing fortunes and try and move to bigger stadia. It's not going to be that easy for a club like Bournemouth. And when you take a look at the likes of Sunderland, who moved all the way from Roker Park to the state to um, I don't quite remember the name of that, but
Stadium of
middle,
Light.
yeah, and yeah, that's right, Stadium of Light. You're right, mate. And Middlesbrough also moved from Ayresome Park to the Riverside Stadium. And so they but both of those stadiums, of course, were those old stadia were, knocked down afterwards, and so they knew that they had to try and move forward.
Hmm.
And Sunderland and Middlesbrough have had a very long history, and they have had some success. But of course, now they're still trying to sort of get back in amongst the elite, and that's not necessarily guaranteed. And I'm sure Foley doesn't want Bournemouth to be another yo-yo club, but if the club can, re-establish themselves as a consistent Premier League team, there's no reason why, you can't build on that. And it's going to take a great deal of, pluck from the team to ensure that they do continue to build on it and try and sort of move forward. Because we've seen teams, Craig, like Blackburn Rovers
Yeah.
and Leicester City win the Premiership after some spectacular seasons, but very soon afterwards get relegated.
Mm.
And it was really disappointing in Blackburn's case for Jack Walker and also in Leicester's case for the owner's family there when they got relegated because they had a beautiful story and they wanted to try to continue to build on that, but I think they went too big too soon. We all know with the Southeast Coast connection about what happened with Portsmouth after they won the FA Cup under Harry Redknapp. They tried to invest very heavily, and we all sadly saw what happened to them. So I think Foley's in some respect doing the right thing by you know proceeding a little bit slowly and not wanting to have too much too soon. And it sounds like a sounder investment in many ways. And as long as there is the potential, to expand on that capacity, it's not going to be stuck at 18,000. Then that seems to be perfect. I suppose my only issue is that with Dean Court's current capacity being a little bit higher than that, I just wonder, you know, uh, how the current supporters will necessarily be looking at that. I think they're going to have to sort of understand that it will be, a means of starting small and then getting a little bit bigger, and try and expand a little bit even further. You talk about the catchment area with Bournemouth, and to make the most of that would definitely be decent. It's certainly not going to be, you know, with any of the London clubs. We all know how overpopulated and how densely populated London is. Trying to find a good stadium over there would literally be like looking for a needle in a haystack. And we, of course, had to move from our beloved Highbury to Ashburton Grove, which is about a kilometre or so away, or a mile or so away from our spiritual home. But Highbury had class, Highbury had character. And if you were to speak to any of my mates who are Arsenal fans with their own YouTube channels, they'll tell you that the Highbury days were the best. And that going to Ashburton Grove is, completely a soulless experience. And I'll put you on to a few people. So, some of them even follow, are even subscribed to Up the Cherries in all departments, and they can tell you
Yes.
exactly the same thing. So back to Foley. I like the way he's going about it. And as long as the fans are willing to be convinced by him, and he can also communicate more effectively with the fans on this issue and make it clear that he does have good plans for the club moving forward, but also a good contingency plan, I think that's going to be fine. And bear in mind, if he were at a bigger club like a Chelsea or an Arsenal, he'd be expected to always plan ahead. But as Chelsea are finding out under Roly Poly Bowley, it's not, rosy
Vote.
in that garden.
I think he's sensible businessman. And I think this all makes financial sense. The other thing as well is when I was doing that thumbnail, I was looking for stadiums, and there was only one stadium that I was going to go to, and that was MK Dons, for a stadium that's too big for the club, because the
Ah,
last thing you want is to and let's be honest, AFC Bournemouth at some point in the future are going to be relegated from the Premier League. It's going to be very, very unlikely that we're going to be staying here for 20, 30, 40 years from now. It would be amazing, and it's possible, but is it probable? Probably not. Now, if we spend a period of time in the championship, and do remember, Bill Foley is 77 years old. He is, you know and it's horrible to say, look at it like this. In 40 years time, is he going to be here bankrolling the club? Probably not. Probably not. But at the same time, the way you've got to also look at it is, if we are relegated, the last thing we want to do is be playing in a soulless bowl. And we've seen it. Blackburn Rovers is quite probably a good example as well of a team which, Ewood Park, despite their history, with winning that Premier League title and the history in the past, don't really have the fans to fill out Ewood Park all the time. And it's a case of, right, okay, you can expect, 2,000-3,000 seats not taken, but once it becomes, like in the case of MK Dons, where it's over 50% of your stadium, it becomes a little bit stupid. And that's why I think that what Bill Foley is doing is very, very sensible. Is very, very sensible. Um, and, you know, hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to work out well for us in the future as well. Um, so no, it's all good. The other thing as well, though, Bill Foley did mention, it doesn't sound like Bournemouth are going to sign any players in the January window, which is, of course, coming up, which I'm not too worried about. What I'm more worried about is players leaving. And one player leaving is Lloyd Kelly. Now, Lloyd Kelly is out of contract at the end of the season. You know, if he's not going to sign a contract now, would you say that it has to be done before Christmas, which gives us just over a week, or we should just cash in on Lloyd Kelly? Because the last thing we want to do is, because he has got these suitors, he's got Spurs, believe it or not. There is even talk of him going abroad. Um, I personally think if he's not signed a new contract by Christmas Day, then I think it's just a case of, look, we've got to just cash in. there's no. It's better to just get some money for him rather than let him go on free.
Easier said than done, my dear friend, and I'll tell you why. With the injury problems that your defence has been having this season, can you really
Mm.
afford to let Lloyd Kelly go?
He's
And
injured himself.
oh, mate, then that's it. I mean, like we don't even know if he's going to come back by the new year, so you can't
Mm,
just try to sell him and then put him in limbo with his new club because he might not even get to play.
mm,
So that's a risk you're just going to have to sort of take. And I would like to think that if he were to come back into the team and start playing well until the end of the season and really secure his place in that defense, whether it be in the middle or even on the left, because I do believe that he has been used as a left back at times,
yeah.
he could end up deciding to stay and maybe sign a 1-year extension. And then you could give yourselves the option of maybe trying to cash in on him in December of the following season if you were to get some more defenders coming in. And
Mm,
believe it or not, with a Cherries connection, there is talk about trying to sell Aaron Ramsdale. I think a lot of clubs have made it clear that they wouldn't mind taking him in. Eddie
yeah.
Howe has made it clear that he'd like to have him on loan because Pope's pretty much crocked for the rest of the whole season. Martin Dubravka's come in and probably not really been at fault for many of the goals, but he hasn't exactly been dominating, and that's 9 goals in 3 games that the poor bloke's conceded. He will, of course, be starting for Slovakia in the Euros as their number 1 goalkeeper, so he will need some game time, but, he hasn't really been very convincing, and I think, if Eddie Howe can get another goalkeeper to sort of, compete with him and maybe just plug that gap, it would be good. They also do have Loris Karius, the former Liverpool goalkeeper, and Mark Gillespie, but it's quite interesting to note that neither of those two have actually been trusted well enough. I think it's fair to say, though, that maybe Howe's resigned himself to sort of sticking with those 3 goalkeepers, or maybe if he does get a new goalkeeper, he will have to send either Gillespie or Karius out on loan and keep Dubravka in the squad as the understudy or competitor or cover or what have you.
Mhm.
There was talk of them coming in for Aaron Ramsdale, but I think Arteta's made it crystal clear that there's no way that he will allow the ex-Cherry goalkeeper to leave in January. And he can't allow him to leave in January because we can't be in a situation where we only have David Raya and Karl Hein as our goalkeepers.
Yeah.
So bear in mind that Ramsdale had signed a multi-year deal around about last season when things were going so swimmingly for him. He was having that wonderful purple patch, and I think he had done well enough to make the team of the season. But come the final stretch, he was making far too many dreadful errors, and the
Mhm.
team lost their way. And Arteta saw it fit to try to get a goalkeeper who would be, in his eyes, a little bit of an upgrade on him. But Raya has proven himself to be a poor shot stopper at times. He can very easily be out-muscled on high balls by taller, bigger players. And, neither of those 2 goalkeepers at the moment, and I'm sorry because I know you like Aaron quite a bit, have proven themselves to be quite the finished article. But it seems to be Arsenal's way that we get players to sign some deals to remain at the club. And then, at the first opportunity, we cash in on them and take advantage of their high value. And with Ramsdale being valued quite highly, a lot of people are saying January is the best time to sell him, but we can't sell him in January. We might have to wait until the end of the season, and then we can try and look to get a fee for him. So with regard to Lloyd Kelly, it's unfortunate that you've allowed him to run down his contract.
Yeah.
And he is, of course, now with you guys until the end of the season. And, of course, he is injured. I'd like to think that he should be able to come back into the team once he recovers from his injury and start to play well, and then maybe you can have him sign an extension. But also, that means that you can possibly have some leeway to work around him to sell him in December. Once in the summer, you get some more defenders to strengthen your squad. So that's hopefully the course of action that you will take, because I know you don't want to lose him on a free, but you also cannot run the risk of trying to get rid of him in January when, defensively you might not have the cover that you need, especially if you're not going to buy anyone in that window.
Yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And I think the last topic I want to cover off with you is, and for this week is Neil Blake and Richard Hughes. Now, a lot of fans have been very, very negative about Neil Blake and Richard Hughes. Neil Blake, of course, the CEO of AFC Bournemouth, the man who is there always next to the players when they sign new contracts. Richard Hughes seems to be doing a lot of the scouting and picking out the players and things like that. Richard Hughes, it was understood. I haven't heard any more about this. It was going around, and some reputable sources as well was mentioning it. It seemed like he was actually going to be leaving the club, was basically being put on gardening leave, but that doesn't seem to have happened. So, not really sure what's happened there. But I think those two deserve a lot more credit than they're actually getting for the transfer business that we've done. And I'll explain why. Alex Scott. Everybody was in for Alex Scott. Everybody wanted to sign Alex Scott. We got him. The players that we signed, yes, we've spent 120 million. And whenever you spend money, there's always going to be that element of risk. But I can't think, apart from Hamid Traore, of one player that I could say was a waste of money. Hamid Traore, I wouldn't even say he's a waste of money. I would say that maybe he just hasn't had his opportunity in the side this season. Against Manchester City last season, the 4-1 defeat at Dean Court, I thought he looked very, very good. He looked very promising, looked skillful, very quick. Maybe he's just not come on the way that Andoni wants him to, but I still think he's got a part to play. But what do you say to these fans that are knocking, somebody like Richard Hughes? And you look at our transfer activity. There's not one bad signing there. Yeah, Tyler Adams is another one that's been mentioned. But Tyler Adams, A, is done for the American market. But B, he's a very, very good player when he's fit. And I think it's a case of we've bought him for the future. We've not bought him there and now. It didn't feel like it. It felt like, and I think, of course, people were panicking because the team was struggling. But now we're not. Surely everybody's got to sit back and look at the transfers we've made, players coming in, say we've done some bloody great business, really.
Yeah, I mean, look, for Neil Blake and Richard Hughes, I can definitely talk about a certain Edu Gaspar over at Arsenal and some of his other minions. We've made a few decent purchases, but the problem is we've also made some purchases which have proven to be duds more often than not. So I would definitely say to all your fellow Cherry fans, do please count your blessings. It has been very unfortunate, of course, that Adams has been injured. And I would go so far to say, Craig, that by signing the United States of America captain, he's not just a signing for the future. He's definitely a signing for the present. And if and when he's fit, he's outstanding. I saw him play, of course, at the World Cup in Qatar for the US, and he was a part of that team which held our lot to a 1-1 draw. And of course, for that US team, our then goalkeeper, Matthew Turner, had a stormer of a game. How ironic it was that Arsenal's first choice was a reserve, whereas Arsenal's reserve and former reserves, Fabianski and Martinez and Szczesny, former goalkeepers were all, not Fabianski, Szczesny and Martinez were first choice for their nations at the World Cup, but that's another story for another day. But Adams did an excellent job being able to marshal that midfield, which had quite a few stars in it, including the likes of Weston McKennie and Taylor Dest and Timothy Weah. And when I heard that you lot had signed Adams, I told myself, you lucky jammy so-and-sos. What a player he is. I know he might not always have, set the world alight at Leeds United, but when Bournemouth got him, you got yourself a player on your hands. And the fact that he's still injured and hasn't really played very much is very unfortunate. First of all, do you know if there's a timeline for him to be back to full fitness?
It's going to be in the new year, of course. And of course, I think it sounds like March is probably going to be when, which is, a long time out, a long time out. But with, the new training regimes, at the football club, why not? I think that this is, like Bill Foley did say in the interview with Kris Temple, he wants our players to be healthy. He doesn't want them to be injured. And there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done on getting the players fit and ready for Premier League football week in, week out. Some of those players like Tyler Adams, and I guess Alex Scott could be probably put into that category as well. It's no fault of their own, but it's a case of improving their fitness to make sure that they can play the intense speed. Because let's be honest, looking back at that Manchester United game, the pace we played it at was quick. And to do that, we have to have a fit side, a side who are able to do that on a regular basis. So, yeah, personally, I think that the plans for the future at the club are all really rosy, and Neil Blake, Richard Hughes have signed some real gems. There is that argument that Nicholas Jackson, maybe we should have signed him. Why did we not sign him? Because of his injuries. But at the same time, I think we got away with one there, didn't we?
Oh, mate, you dodged a bullet. If you talk to Chelsea fans right now, they pretty much might be singing that song. He's bad, he's bad. He's bad, and the whole world has to answer right now. Because let me tell you once again, he's bad. I know that's a different sort of Jackson, but you get my drift. And we Arsenal fans were saying the same thing about how we dodged a bullet by not getting Mikhailo Mudryk, but credit to Mauricio Pochettino, he was able to get the Ukrainian boy to start playing really well, and he was actually looking really good in patches. Still needs to work on his consistency in his all-round game, but at his age, you think that there's a bit of a high ceiling. But as far as Jackson is concerned, he had a decent start. I think that jammy hat trick he got at the Tottenham Stadium was pretty much inflated his head a bit, and he thinks he's better than he actually is, and he does need to improve. Sorry, son, you're now learning the hard way that you're only as good as your next game, and you've been pants ever since. So, with regard to the players that you signed, for the most part, I agree with you. I mean, I take a look at some of the players you've got: Max Aarons, Justin Kluivert, Tyler Adams. Kluivert, in particular, has been an absolute revelation, and in my opinion, if he continues to perform well, it shouldn't be unfathomable that he finds his way into the Dutch squad for the European Championships and perhaps emulate his dad once again. Bear in mind that, he did earn a few caps, of course, back in the day, but then sort of fell away. And so far has not quite been able to emulate his illustrious father, who played nearly 80 times for the Oranje and was a star at several of their World Cup campaigns, including, of course, memorably at France 98. But, Justin Kluivert's story is really a heartwarming one. And it's a real testament to how, Blake and Hughes have been able to really look and spot a lot of talent that most teams wouldn't even be interested in. Of course, I was speaking to one of my mates, shout out to Danny, AFC TV, about Justin, and he was saying, brother, look, he was a really fine player back in the day, and he would have been great for us, but he just fell away. But maybe Bournemouth's the right place for him to sort of get his mojo back. And I tell you what, if he does rediscover his form, I think at Bournemouth he's sort of found a new spiritual home for him. So I wouldn't want to see him leave either. So yeah, you do have some gems, and I think the most important thing is that if Adams and Scott can get back to fitness by the new year or by March, and that will be good. And, the most amazing thing about sports science these days, Craig, is that just when you think players will be out for a very long time, they surprise you with their recovery time and they're back before you know it. a lot of talk was about the fear that over on our neck side of the side, Yuri and Timber would be out for almost the whole season. But now there is some talk about him possibly coming back in the new year, at least maybe in February, if not January. Bear in mind, he did his ACL against Forest in the first game of the season. So also take a look at rugby, which is an exceptionally violent game. Look at the legendary Wales captain Alan Wynne-Jones, who was meant to captain the Lions on their tour to the world champion South Africa, but sustained a shoulder injury in a tour match, and everybody thought his tour would be over. But the amazing work that he did away while the Lions were playing their tour games, he got back in time to play about half an hour in the final tour game, proved his fitness, and he was there playing in all three tests. So you just never know. I mean, the way sports science has evolved and the way players have also taken their recovery seriously, you never know. And look at Kieran Tierney. Everybody thought he'd be out until at least February, but he's back in the team in December, and at Sociedad. And it's great news for Scotland, great news for Sociedad. And as an Arsenal fan who absolutely adores the fella, I'm delighted for him. So, more pertinently, coming back to your players, yes, I completely agree that work needs to be done to try to improve the fitness of the players because, some of the guys, especially if they come to the Premier League from other leagues where, they haven't really had too much of a workload on their legs. Thomas Partey is a case in point. Some of them are not really able to sort of withstand the very high rough and tumble intensity of the Premier League. But maybe that's a sort of an indictment on how the game is played over here in some ways. And, injuries aren't in players' hands. And, Yuri and Timber getting injured that way is another sorry chapter to our terrible list of injuries. I don't know whether it's the training methods or whatever, but we seem to have so many people join our club, start well, then get injured, and, they're not quite the same after that. Hopefully Timber won't be that way, but we just can't tell. But yes, the fitness of the players will have to improve. And if Foley can take some steps to make that happen, then he will leave something behind for when he decides to step down. And I'd like to think that he will be sensible enough to, reach a certain point where he may decide, I don't know if I can handle the stress anymore. I'd like to sort of hand it to people who can take over. And let's bear in mind, it wasn't just Foley who bought Bournemouth. I believe there was a consortium with him who bought it, right? So if he were to step down, surely one of that consortium would step up and pick up from where he left off. So I like the way things have been, done over at Bournemouth. I think Foley, as you've said, has done things very sensibly, true to his reputation as a sensible businessman. And everything should come up cherries, if not roses. But the most important thing now is that you focus on this weekend's game against the Hatters and just get the 3 points and just focus on doing what you need to do. And as for the statement you made where you were honest enough to say that Bournemouth at one point will get relegated, hopefully, I hope that doesn't happen too soon at the very least. And, we saw with Luton Town how they tragically missed out on being a part of the original Premier League season when they got relegated from the old First Division in 1992. It took them a long time to come up and experience everything again. And they obviously wouldn't want to, have a taste of it and then go back down. And there have been other clubs who were there for quite some time, but they've also, had to go back down. Maybe none of them have had the meticulous planning that Bournemouth have right now. But I would like to see if you can improve on last season's performances and, sort of evolve the squad a little bit more every year. There's no reason why you can't stay for a little bit longer. But again, it's just another reminder you cannot look too far forward.
No, most definitely. Most definitely. And of course, Bill Foley, part of that consortium with Neill, and of course, Michael B. Jordan, not Michael Jordan, the basketball player, but Michael B. Jordan. So we've got Adonis Creed. Do you know what? When you were singing that bit from Michael Jackson to Nicholas Jackson, just to finish on a little bit of a light note. I did, it started going through my head other songs you could associate with football players with the names. And of course, started with Brian Adams, connected to Tyler Adams. And then I did well, there was a song that went into my head. You might laugh at this. I cried. But
I'm
of
ready.
course, Michael Jordan, the world's greatest. What song was that from? That was, and then I thought, is that Brian? No, it's not. It's R. Kelly, Lloyd Kelly. Yes, don't go there. If, if there's any,
Wouldn't dream of it.
I tell you what, that's a challenge for everybody. Put in the comments, a Bournemouth player and a singer who sang a song, connect the two somehow, but don't go anywhere near R. Kelly. There we go. I think that's probably where to finish.
Yeah, and
it comes straight into my mind, and I was just like,
yeah. But
who sang that song? Yes, probably.
Bear in mind that R. Kelly is not the only singer you will want to avoid. I can think of at least one or two that you might want to avoid.
Yeah,
and yeah, but of course, the best part is that once you get those songs, you can use that as chance for individual players. And believe it or not, I believe William Saliba has his own chant to, I don't quite remember what that what the name of that song is, but there was a campaign to sort of have a chant for him to the tune of the Monkees' "I'm a Believer," Saliba, believer, and all of that. And of course, after we lost Patrick Vieira, Fabio Vieira ended up being the new recipient of that Vieira, that Volare thing. But any Arsenal fan worth his salt will tell you that Fabio isn't anywhere near in Patrick's league. But that is a wonderful topic on which to end it. And I would say to all of you Cherries fans, if you can find that connective song, go to Dean Court, make that your chant for that player. You could really do something. And of course, now that Justin Kluivert's in the team, you can obviously try and think of something, sung by a certain Mr. Timberlake, if you like. Think of something that might...
Never thought of that one. Never thought of that one. Justin Timberlake.
Aren't you glad to have me on this show?
I tell you what, we're starting something now. We're starting something. Going to go through the whole team. Neto, Nelly Furtado. Is there a link there? No.
I'm sure there'll be something. You could say he's like a bird. He likes to fly away. I don't know if he necessarily flies that much to make any of his saves, but listen, you lot can probably think about something even better than I can because you've got a bigger connection to the club and the players than I do. I have enough trouble trying to figure out something for my players, probably because there are very few in that team who I really like. Of course, we've got three Gabriels, both of them are Brazilians. We could call them the Bee Gees. And if they perform well, you could say they give us a case of night fever.
Quality. Do you know what? I'm loving this final bit of the conversation. Manny, it's a pleasure as always. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll do it next week. I'm sure we can do. The final one before Christmas and, of course, the busy period that we're going into. It's going to be non-stop, isn't it? Going to be non-stop in the coming weeks.
Yep, it will be. And as always, listen, whenever you find time, you know the drill. You call, I come running.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure I'll be calling for next week. A Christmas special, episode 40. Up to 40 already. Crikey. That's I didn't realise we'd been doing it that long. But Cherries fans, until the next one, we'll see you. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, bell button, all that jazz. Fingers crossed, 3 points against Luton. We'll see you next week. Up the Cherries.